Do you acknowledge white people, Europeans, and Asians as African?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They are not Africans. Even if they evolved from us, they are now a distinctly different race. Now, multiculturalists and integrationists and colorblind Negroes would say they have 2 arms and 2 legs and they have 2 eyes just like the rest of us. How are they not a part of our human family? And I'll tell you why. Biology is only one aspect of reality. What about spirituality? What about psychology? What about cosmology? What about sociology? Even though the white man may have all the body parts of an African, we do not share the same worldview. We do not share the same spiritual principles. We do not. Thank you. Glad to be here, brother.
To the panel show.
Yes, sir.
So unfortunately, I don't think we have as much time as I would have wished for our conversation. And for that reason, I'm going to apologize to our regular audience that this is going to be more of an interview than a conversation.
All right.
I think just to kick it off, I'd like to welcome you warmly again.
Thank you.
South Africa, Azania, and the African continent as the Prince of Pan-Africanism.
Absolutely.
I'd like to, of course, thank the organizers that brought you here. Your name has changed, and it's not even the first time. When you do research, which a lot of people don't, born Umar Rashad Ibn Abdullah Johnson is what I found.
Born Jermaine Shoemake.
Oh, you're actually born Jermaine.
Yes, sir.
Shoemake.
Yes, sir.
And then you changed your name, and now you
and then my father changed my name when he married my mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the reason for that?
My mother named me after Jermaine Jackson, and my father couldn't stand Jermaine Jackson.
Jeez. Why not? Wanted to name you Michael.
He probably was jealous. Yeah, but I was Jermaine Shoemake, and then my father changed my name when they were married. I was about 7 or 8 years old. Ifatunde Oguntade, that is the name that was given to me during the process of a spiritual divination at the Oyotunji African Village in South Carolina, a traditional African spiritual village based on the Ifa spiritual system practiced by the Yoruba of Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was November 19th, 2011. So it's been 12 years now. It's only more recently I've been more forceful with asking brothers and sisters to refer to me as Ifatunde and to drop the Johnson. I've asked for years, but I've gotten tired of them not dropping the Johnson.
Yeah.
So now 2023, my New Year's resolution is to force Ifatunde upon the community.
How important are names to you?
Names are very important. I think names give us some insight into our destiny.
Yeah.
You know, traditional African culture, we're all born with a destiny. And that name helps to give us some insight into that destiny. So when I look at Ifatunde, that means destiny has returned. And Oguntade, Ogun wears the crown. And so Ogun is the spirit of iron, the spirit of energy, truth, and justice. And that's the archetype that I was born under.
Would you argue that Johnson is a slave name?
Absolutely.
I ask this particularly because a lot of Black Americans still to this day carry their previous slave
Don't
owners.
say Black American, say American African.
American African.
Yes, sir.
You do know that a lot of African Americans don't like that term.
Well, they use African American. We're comfortable with African American, but I prefer American African.
Okay.
Because we are not Americans, never have never been treated as such.
Yeah.
And the adjective precedes the noun. So when you say African American, you're describing a type of an American.
Okay.
We're not Americans. When you say American African, you're describing a type of an African. So that's why we say American African. American simply describes the African. Versus African describing the American. We are Africans in an American context.
I hear you.
But when you say Black American, just to give you some clarity,
Yeah.
it wasn't until recently that the United States government has reverted to referring to us as Black American. Since the 1980s, they referred to us as African American, which I don't agree with because I prefer American African. But they've started using Black American again instead of African American. which is a deliberate attempt to cut us off from our African consciousness.
Yeah.
And it is also a strategy to try to distract away from the current argument by your American African brothers and sisters for reparations and restitutions due to slavery.
Would you argue that Johnson was a slave name?
Absolutely.
And that other American Africans should drop theirs?
Ultimately, yes. The reason I pause when I ask that question is sometimes I think as African people, whether we're in America, Africa, the Caribbean, or throughout the diaspora, sometimes we focus too much on superficialities as opposed to substantive change. Yeah. So in other words, every African in the diaspora could drop our European names, take an African name, and we should. But is that the priority? No. Freedom, justice, and liberation is the priority.
Yeah.
The Honorable Marcus Garvey never changed his name, but his contribution to African liberation is almost unparalleled.
100%.
John Henry Clark, Amos Wilson, a lot of our grandmaster teachers never changed their name, but they changed the condition of the people.
Yeah.
So I'm a big supporter of changing your name, but I'm even a bigger supporter of changing the conditions. Do the work first, and the name will follow.
Are there currently institutions helping American Africans and other Africans in diaspora to go through the rites of passage of letting go of their past life and being reborn as an Ifatunde, as an example, so that when the name changes, the substance has been changed as well?
Not really. We do have some institutions who are about that work, but the problem in the diaspora and in America is most of our organizations, even the so-called revolutionary or cultural ones, they're financed by the government or white philanthropy, which obviously for me as a Garveyite and a Pan-Africanist, that's a contradiction. Your enemy can never play a role in your liberation. There's a book that was written not too long ago. It's called The Revolution Will Not Be Financed. The book talks about why African people haven't made more progress in the modern era because we're still dependent on European capital to fund our initiatives and institutions. It needs to be all black or it will never work for us. Your enemy will never finance your independence, but we are too greedy for white money to understand that reality.
A lot of South Africans have, whenever I speak about Dr. Umar, used to be Johnson, now Ifatunde. They raise something you raised on the Breakfast Club with DJ Envy, Angela Yee, and Charlemagne the God about South African schools teaching Mandarin. They say you were misinformed and you were lying. I'd like you, if you may, to explain why you said that and what informed them.
Yes, indeed. I stand by what I said. The issue was I did not articulate the truth as effectively as I could have in that moment. First of all, let's put it in context. When I go to the Breakfast Club, you have a limited amount of time. So I have to get as much information as I can in that hour. And so what I said was Mandarin was required in South African schools. What I intended to say was the South African Ministry of Education has approved the instruction of Mandarin in South African schools. It was a small glitch, which was clarified. That interview was about 7-8 years ago. I've since clarified that 1,000,000 times. The issue wasn't that. The issue is you have Negroes, whether they're in America or South Africa, who hate hearing the truth. The truth of the matter is Mandarin shouldn't be in your schools at all because this is not a Mandarin country. This is not Chinese. They're not teaching Chinese kids Zulu or Xhosa. So why are we teaching South African kids Mandarin? But what you know about language instruction in school is what globally? Language instruction follows the economic imperative of the nation.
100%.
The reason why Mandarin is being slowly introduced into South African schools is because the Chinese are slowly making headway into South African economy. Always follow the languages that they teach in school, and it shows you who's next up to be the economic oppressor.
Neocolonialism. Just to add context, it was in 2016, our Minister of Basic Education, Umar Johnson, was saying that Mandarin was going to be introduced in over 500 schools in the country as a second additional language. At the time, we had 15 schools then. So I found myself questioning why so many people were frustrated by you saying that. And I think it was largely because of ignorance and not knowing what was going on.
Absolutely.
To the ordinary person out there and to the ordinary African out there, what is Pan-Africanism?
Pan-Africanism, if I was to sum it up in three basic principles. Number one, all African people are one family. Whether you're in South Africa speaking Zulu or Xhosa, whether you're in Nigeria speaking Yoruba or Igbo, whether you're in Kenya speaking Maasai or Kikuyu, whether you're in Senegal speaking Wolof or Mandingo, whether you're in South Bronx speaking Ebonics, or in Haiti speaking French, or Brazil speaking Portuguese, be one family. And it doesn't matter what your religion is, whether you're Muslim or Christian or traditional African spiritualist, whether you pledge allegiance to this flag or that flag, whether you're light skin or dark skin, straight hair, nappy hair like mine, one family. Yeah. And we should identify on the level of our Africanity first. Being African is more important than anything else. Why? Because God made you an African. Everything else you belong to, you chose. You can leave Christianity tomorrow. You can leave Islam tomorrow. You can renounce your South African citizenship tomorrow. I could give up my American citizenship, so-called, tomorrow. You understand? I could never give up being an African. God made us African, and that's what we should identify with first.
Do you believe in the history and the science that man originated in Africa?
Oh, absolutely. It's indisputable. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because right now in America, we have a ridiculous dialogue going on, because there's some reactionary, self-hating Africans who are trying to convince other American Africans that they don't come from Africa, that they were already in America. They're positing that America, the American continent, was a cradle of civilization. Mind you, no scientific research at all backs this theory up. Okay,
even Europeans can't dispute.
It's indisputable. The Chinese just came out last month, one of the top geneticists in China, who now stated that their first ancestor in China was an African, and every Chinese carries the DNA. The East Indians have already done this. Mexicans have done it. So you mean to tell me the people in the diaspora who look the most like the African American, you have nothing to do with Africa genetically? It's ridiculous. But we have to look at the mentality behind that. Nobody wants to be on a losing team.
True.
And until African people start winning globally, nobody wants to be a part of us. This is why you have Spanish-speaking Africans in the Caribbean who will call themselves Latino or Hispanic. They're Africans, but who wants to be part of a losing team? It's just like when you go throughout Africa, it's not, I still run across Africans who will tell you, I'm French, I'm British, you understand? Because nobody wants to be part of a losing team. But the minute African people get our situation back in order, everybody who don't want to be black will proudly return to the race. We have to give them something to be proud of. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, the white man has made being black a curse. I'm going to make being black a blessing. He said we have to sell being African back to the African.
If life originated in Africa and the original man, woman are from Africa, how do we explain Europeans, Asians, maybe even Latinos?
There's a great book written by probably the greatest archaeologist and cultural anthropologist in human history. Not black, but I would say he was the greatest of all time. I'm sure you know his name, Cheikh Anta Diop from Senegal. He wrote a book called The African Origin of Civilization. Everybody needs to read it. This was the scholar who snuck into, I don't want to say snuck, went into the temples of Kemet, took melanin, or should I say took pigment or skin off of the mummies of the pharaohs, came up with a melanin dosage test and proved that the kings and queens of Kemet had to be African based on the percentage of melanin in their skin. It was Cheikh Anta Diop who proved to the world that all 5 stages of modern man originated in Africa. The first stage of modern man, all African. Second stage, all African. Third, all African. Homo sapien, the 4th stage, all African. And then we're the 5th stage, Homo sapien sapien. It was only the Homo sapien sapien who left Africa. If the Homo sapien sapien, modern African, never leaves Africa, we never go into Europe, we never experience the Ice Age, Europeans never come, they never evolve. Asians never evolve. Indians never evolve. You don't get another race on earth if the African never leaves Africa. And for that reason, I would like to ask our great African ancestors, why in the hell did you leave the continent? Because if you didn't, we wouldn't be dealing with white supremacy.
Do you acknowledge white people, Europeans, and Asians as African?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They are not Africans. Even if they evolved from us, they are now a distinctly different race. Now, multiculturalists and integrationists and colorblind Negroes would say they have 2 arms and 2 legs and they have 2 eyes just like the rest of us. How are they not a part of our human family? And I'll tell you why. Biology is only one aspect of reality. What about spirituality? What about psychology? What about cosmology? What about sociology? Even though the white man may have all the body parts of an African, we do not share the same worldview. We do not share the same spiritual principles. We do not share the same sociological assimilation. Nothing about the African and the European is the same except the fact we share the same human body. So I do not agree that white people are Africans. They are Caucasians, and they have nothing to do with us.
So part of the argument is climate, the ice age. Part of it is diet, which may have affected pigmentation and those kind of things. Would you ever consider a journey? It may not be yours. It may be for our children, our children's children, to liberate and rescue Europeans and Asians and bring them back home?
That's a trap. We have to be careful because a lot of Africans around the world have taken on this responsibility of civilizing the Neanderthal. I'm not interested in civilizing the Neanderthal because the Neanderthal can't be civilized. Remember, we did this before. Did we not go into Europe and civilize Spain? Did we not go into Europe and civilize Italy? Did we not already go into Europe and take those backward European tribes and try to make them decent human beings? And what did Africa get for that? You got enslaved. What did Africa get for trying to civilize the white man? You got colonialism. What did Africa get for trying to teach the white man how to live as a decent human being? You got neocolonialism. Every time we tried to introduce the white man to human civilization, we suffered. Stop trying to save the white man. Save yourself.